I spotted a strange man giving my wife flowers at the company dinner. The moment her eyes locked with mine, I saw everything fall apart. The fake smile froze on her face, her hands hesitated to take the bouquet, and her lover slowly turned around, realizing the storm was about to break. There was no hesitation in my steps, nor in the tone of my voice as I approached the table with fury burning inside my chest. What do these flowers mean? And why are you together? My voice cut through the noise of the restaurant, the looks around turned to us. It's all over, I'm going to divorce you now. The woman I once swore to love looked at me as if she were seeing a stranger. And maybe that was exactly it. Because, in front of that scene, I also realized that the woman sitting in front of me, holding a bouquet of roses as if it were a trophy, was no longer the same woman I knew. The lover tried to say something, maybe a lame justification, maybe some excuse, but I didn't even want to hear it. Who the hell are you? I said, feeling the bile rising. The answer came too quickly, and it made my skin crawl. Just a friend. Friend. Funny. No friend holds another man's wife's hand like that. No friend looks at her as if they've already seen every inch of her body. No friend sits at her table at a company dinner, giving flowers as if they were in charge of the situation. She opened her mouth, voice shaking, trying to reach my hand. I can explain. I walked away, disgusted. The explanation didn't matter. The lies were already dripping from her lips before I even had time to ask. And then, in the midst of the whirlwind of emotions that swallowed my chest, something hit me like a punch. That man wasn't just a lover. He was a complete stranger to me. He didn't work at the company, I never saw him in our neighborhood, he wasn't part of our social circle. Who was he? Where did it come from? I was about to find out. That night, my life would turn into a nightmare. But the real horror was not the betrayal itself. That's what I would discover about the man who was sitting at the table with my wife, smiling as if he had already won the game. And when the truth came out, everything I thought I knew about my own life would fall apart. Welcome to the channel. Here, we do not support any type of betrayal. The stories you will hear are fictional, but the message is real. Betrayal destroys lives, ruins trust and leaves scars that never disappear. Our goal is to show the consequences of this devastating choice. Get ready for a shocking story, full of twists, intense emotions and an ending that will surprise you. Fasten your seatbelts, the truth always comes out. The restaurant's hall was filled with excited voices, glasses clinking in toasts and yellowish lights that gave the atmosphere a sophisticated air. The tables were occupied by executives, employees and their families, all celebrating another year of the company's achievements. In the midst of those well-dressed people, sitting side by side, were Daniel and Laura, a couple who, at first glance, seemed like the picture of stability and success. He, with his impeccable suit and the posture of someone who has always had control over his own life. She, with an elegant dress, discreet smile and an aura of sophistication that effortlessly attracted attention. Daniel had worked at the company for years and had earned respect and admiration for his dedication and professional ethics. He was a meticulous man, who valued every detail and always sought excellence, whether at work or in his personal life. Laura, on the other hand, was a woman with a striking presence, always attentive to the people around her, someone who could captivate anyone with her soft speech and attentive gaze. They had been together for almost 10 years, and to everyone who knew them, they were the perfect couple, the definition of a solid, successful relationship. But perfection has its flaws. While Daniel was busy with professional commitments, business trips and exhausting meetings, Laura learned to fill her own gaps in other ways. In the early years, she devoted herself to him with devotion, anxiously awaiting the moment when he would come home, preparing sophisticated dinners and trying to keep the spark of their relationship alive. But over time, the absences became longer, the hugs shorter, and the affectionate words turned into practical dialogues about bills, commitments and everyday banalities. Earlier that evening, Daniel had invited her to the company event, a dinner that he himself wasn't too excited about attending, but he knew was part of the corporate game. Laura accepted the invitation without hesitation. As much as she knew that these events were full of forced conversations and calculated smiles, it was an opportunity to get out of the routine, be by her husband's side and, who knows, feel again the connection that seemed to fade over the years. When they arrived at the restaurant, they were warmly greeted by Daniel's coworkers. He introduced her to some of the directors and, as always, she knew how to lead the conversation naturally. Laura was the type of person who stood out without having to try. His charm lay in the subtlety of his gestures, in the way he tilted his head when he heard someone speak, in the delicate smiles he distributed without seeming forced. For Daniel, she was excellent company at events like that, as she made everything seem lighter. He was used to seeing her like this, surrounded by people who seemed genuinely enchanted by her presence. And for a while, that was enough for him. It was enough to know that she was there, by his side, even if, deep down, he knew that he didn't give her all the attention she deserved. But that night, something felt different. Laura seemed distracted. Not in an obvious way, but Daniel noticed the small details. Her eyes wandered around the room, her smile seemed rehearsed, and, every now and then, she checked her cell phone with a restless look. He tried to ignore the uncomfortable feeling it gave him. The dinner continued with the usual formalities, executive speeches, exaggerated toasts and conversations about the company's promising future. Daniel got involved in the interactions, while Laura remained a little further away, observing the environment with a distant gaze. Until, at a certain point, she got up, picked up her bag and said she needed to touch up her makeup. He just nodded and continued the conversation with a coworker, without paying much attention. But the minutes passed, and Laura didn't return. Looking around, he noticed that she was not in the hall. An uneasiness grew within him, but he pushed the thought away. I didn't want to seem paranoid. However, something made him stand up. His gaze swept around the restaurant, trying to find some rational explanation for her absence. It was then that, in the distance, he saw a scene that made his stomach turn. Laura was sitting at a table away, with a man he had never seen before. The stranger was holding a bouquet of flowers, and his expression was that of someone who was completely comfortable next to her. What bothered Daniel most, however, was Laura's look. She didn't seem surprised, nor uncomfortable. On the contrary. For a moment, everything around was silent. The noise from the restaurant disappeared, the voices, the laughter, everything went away. There was only that image. The blood boiled in his veins, and his vision blurred for a second. He couldn't process it. Who was that man? Why was he giving his wife flowers? And, more importantly, why did she seem so comfortable with it? Without thinking, he started walking to the table. Each step was heavy, loaded with something he still couldn't define. Anger, confusion, fear. Something inside him screamed that this scene was not a mere mistake, that this was not a casual encounter, that there was something very wrong happening there. And when he finally stopped in front of the table, feeling Laura's frightened look and the serious expression of the man next to him, the words came out of his mouth without him even thinking. What do these flowers mean and why are you together? It's all over, I'm going to divorce you now. The silence that followed was deafening. Laura looked at him without reaction, while the man maintained a firm posture, without looking away. But something inside Daniel said that this was just the beginning. Something even bigger was hidden behind that scene, something he still couldn't see. And when the truth was revealed, he would realize that sometimes cheating isn't just about infidelity. It's about secrets that should never come to light. Daniel felt his heart pounding against his chest as he stared at Laura and the unknown man in front of him. The company dinner, which should have been just another routine corporate event, had turned into a scene of internal chaos. The silence between the three was heavy, filled with a meaning that had not yet been put into words, but which was already spreading like poison throughout his body. Laura blinked a few times, her lips parted as if searching for the right words to control the situation, but Daniel already knew that look. He wasn't there to hear justifications. The man next to her, with a firm posture and a look that didn't show guilt, didn't try to hide anything. She held the bouquet of flowers with absurd tranquility, as if Daniel's presence wasn't a threat. As if he had already prepared himself for this moment. His calmness made something inside Daniel twist with hatred. He wanted to speak, he wanted to scream, but he didn't know what the exact accusation would be. Laura finally broke the silence, her wavering voice trying to sound steady. He said that wasn't what he was thinking, that there was a logical explanation. But he had heard this phrase before. He already knew that any explanation that came next would not change the pain that ripped through his chest. He didn't want to hear that it was a misunderstanding. I wanted to know how long I had been being made a fool of. The man finally spoke, and his voice carried a calculated tone. She said she didn't want to create a problem, that she was just greeting a friend. But Daniel was no fool. That wasn't how you greeted someone. Not with red roses. Not with that intimacy that overflowed with gestures and looks. He turned to Laura, hoping she would at least have the courage to admit it. But all he found was hesitation. A growing fear in her expression. He wanted her to deny it, to say that it was a grotesque mistake, but that wasn't what happened. She looked away. He took a deep breath. And he was silent. It was at that moment that something inside him broke. The pain came first, like a knife piercing his skin, ripping apart the illusion he had carried for so long. Then came the anger. And, next to it, an emptiness so big that it swallowed any other feeling. He looked around, feeling people's eyes on them. Everyone was watching his marriage collapse, and the humiliation burned hotter than any blow he could take. He turned around without saying anything else, crossing the room with heavy steps, his breathing uneven. I needed to get out of there. I needed air. But when he reached the exit, he realized that the answers he feared most were still trapped inside that restaurant. He couldn't run away. He looked back at the table where Laura was still sitting. She didn't follow him, didn't try to stop him. And that hurt more than any betrayal. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, trying to organize his thoughts. But nothing made sense. Everything seemed like a blur. The dinner, the toast, the laughter from coworkers. And then, that man. That damn scene that would never leave your head. He turned back, crossing the room again, but this time, with a single objective, to extract the truth. When he arrived at the table, Laura was no longer there. Neither does the man. The bouquet of flowers was still on the table, a cruel reminder of what had happened. His chest rose and fell rapidly, adrenaline consuming his senses. He looked around, looking for her, and that's when he saw her. Laura was in the hallway that led to the bathroom, leaning against the wall, her cell phone pressed to her ear. She spoke quietly, but from the way she moved her lips, she seemed to be arguing. Daniel didn't hesitate. He marched towards her, feeling fury explode in his chest. Laura saw him approach and quickly hung up the phone, her fingers shaking as she slipped it into her bag. Her look was that of someone who knew there was no longer any way to escape. Who is he? Daniel's voice was firm, but filled with pain that he couldn't hide. Laura hesitated. He saw her throat move as she swallowed hard, as if choosing her words. But he didn't want to beat around the bush anymore. Tell me the truth now. His voice was lower, but the weight in those words was crushing. She took a deep breath. He looked around, as if looking for a way out. But there was nowhere to run. And then, finally, she admitted it. Daniel felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. He wanted to be wrong. I wish this was all just a bout of paranoia. But it wasn't. She confirmed it completely. The betrayal was real. And worse than that, he felt like that wasn't the worst part. Something in that story was still being hidden from him. And when he found out, he would realize that that night was far from being the worst moment of his life. Daniel felt the weight of the world crumble on his shoulders as Laura's words echoed inside his mind. The betrayal was open. She had admitted. But the feeling that there was still something being hidden kept hammering inside him. There was something about that man, his posture, the way Laura looked away, that screamed that this story was far from complete. Adrenaline burned through his veins, mixed with pain and hatred. He wanted answers. And I wouldn't leave without them. Laura looked at him as if she knew there was nowhere left to run. Her eyes were red, her breathing was rapid, her fingers were squeezing her bag as if it were her anchor in the chaos. Daniel took a step forward, trying to maintain control, but his voice was filled with contained fury. You owe me the truth. The whole truth. Now. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering the courage to say it would be more painful than confessing her betrayal. He noticed the tremor in her hands, the way her posture fell apart. But none of that mattered. He needed to hear. It's not just a case, she began, and her voice trailed off. He's not just anyone. The blood ran cold in her veins before she even continued. He knew. From the moment he saw that man, something inside him already knew. I just didn't want to admit it. Who is he? The question came out almost like a whisper, because part of him was already afraid of the answer. Laura hesitated, but finally said. He's an ex-convict. Daniel's heart stopped for a second. Bile rose in his throat. The world spun. You're kidding me, he murmured, disbelief written all over his face. She shook her head. He left not long ago, and you thought it would be a good idea to get involved with him? Daniel's voice rose, filled with disbelief. My God, Laura, do you have any idea what you did? She pursed her lips, trying to hold back crying, but he didn't feel sorry. All he felt was disgust, anger, a visceral desire to get out of there and never look at her again. But something was stopping him from leaving. He needed to know more. What did he do? His voice was tense, every muscle in his body tensed. Laura looked away. Laura, what did he do? He was arrested for fraud, extortion, and attempted murder. The air left Daniel's lungs. The impact of those words made his body shudder. He looked at her waiting, begging it was a joke. But it wasn't. Are you involved with a criminal? A man who tried to kill someone? She nodded slowly, her gaze lost, as if it was only at that moment that she realized the gravity of what she had done. My God, Daniel passed his hand over his face, trying to process everything. How did this happen? She hesitated before answering. He found me first. Anger exploded inside him again. What does that mean? Laura swallowed. He knew who I was before we even met. He looked for me. He said he knew about my life, about you, about our house. Daniel felt a shiver run down his spine. Did he look for you? Are you saying it was premeditated? She nodded, and that was when everything started to make sense. He wanted something from you, Daniel. He approached me because he knew that through me he could reach you. The blood drained from Daniel's face. He felt a crushing weight on his chest. My money. Laura didn't need to confirm. His silence said it all. He knew about your company, he knew you were about to make an important transaction. He knew you had money. And you made everything easier for him, Daniel spat out the words, feeling his stomach turn. Laura started to cry, and he no longer knew if it was guilt, fear or despair. I didn't know at first. She sobbed. He seemed like someone who cared about me, someone who understood me. But then I realized he wanted something. He started asking questions about your company, about your bank account, about your contacts. And I tried to move away, but he wouldn't let me. Daniel felt his own body boil. Didn't you? He repeated, feeling his heart beating against his chest. She sniffled, taking a deep breath. He threatened me. He said that if I didn't cooperate, he might do something to you, or to me. Daniel felt the weight of the revelation fall on him like a stone. His marriage was already destroyed, but now, his entire life was at risk. He didn't know whether to feel anger at Laura for putting him in that situation or fear for what might happen next. The silence between the two was broken by a vibrating sound. Laura's cell phone started ringing. She looked at the screen and paled. Daniel felt a shiver. "It's him, isn't it?" She nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the phone screen. "He knows we're here." And at that moment, Daniel realized that the betrayal was just the tip of the iceberg. The real nightmare was yet to come. Laura looked at her cell phone screen as if that flashing name was a death sentence. The sound of the vibration seemed to echo inside Daniel's mind, each pulse a reminder that they were not in control of the situation. His heart was beating fast, but it wasn't just anger. Now there was something thicker, a suffocating feeling that he couldn't ignore, real danger. She pressed the button to silence the call and looked up, meeting his. "He's here, isn't he?" Daniel's voice was low, almost a whisper. Laura just nodded, her face pale. He looked around, the restaurant hall seemed to have become smaller. People were talking, toasting, oblivious to what was happening between them. But Daniel felt that this man was there, perhaps watching, waiting. "We need to get out of here," he said, grabbing Laura's wrist and pulling her without giving her a chance to argue. She followed him without resistance, her heels clicking against the marble floor as they crossed the restaurant. He didn't know if they were being followed, but he felt her eyes glued to his back. I needed to think quickly. As soon as they went out into the street, a cold wind hit their face. The parking lot was lit by yellow streetlights, and the cars there seemed distant, as if they belonged to another reality. He held Laura's shoulders and looked straight into her eyes. "Has he followed you before?" She hesitated, her lips pressing together before finally saying, "Yes. Sometimes. But you never came closer when I was with you." Daniel felt his stomach drop. Everything made sense now. Laura's distraction in the last few months, the calls she quickly disconnected, the way she sometimes seemed restless, looking back as they walked together. He had ignored all the signs. "How did he get your number?" he asked, his voice full of frustration. Laura looked down, biting her lip. "I did. At first, he said he just wanted to talk." "My God, Laura," Daniel passed his hand over his face, feeling the bile rising again. Her phone vibrated once again. This time, he grabbed the device from her hand before she could react. He looked at the screen. An unknown number. He answered. "Laura." The voice on the other end was calm, but there was something about it that made the hairs on the back of Daniel's neck stand up. "She can't talk right now," he replied, trying to keep his tone steady. There was silence on the other side. Too long a silence. Ah. So the husband finally discovered everything? The voice was filled with a mocking tone. Daniel gritted his teeth. "Who are you? What do you want?" The man laughed softly. "You know exactly what I want. And now that everything has been exposed, perhaps it's time to settle the score." The phone went silent. Daniel felt a chill run through his body. He looked at Laura, who was watching him with wide eyes, waiting for a reaction. He took a deep breath, trying to organize his thoughts. "He wants money, doesn't he?" She nodded slowly. "How much?" "Everything you have." Daniel felt his blood run cold. He planned this from the beginning. Since leaving prison, he already knew exactly how to approach, how to manipulate the situation. Laura lowered her head. "I tried to get away, Daniel. I swear I tried. But he threatened me. He said if I told him, he would come after you, make it look like an accident." Daniel's chest rose and fell, trying to contain the hatred and despair that consumed him. "Did you think about telling me? Ever?" She hesitated before answering. I thought I could solve it on my own. He laughed, but it was a bitter laugh, filled with disbelief. Solve it alone? Laura, you got involved with a criminal who wants to end my financial life. She covered her face with her hands, sobbing softly. I didn't know what to do. Daniel looked around, trying to decide his next move. Staying there was dangerous. They needed to get out, and quickly. He took her arm and guided her to the car. As I drove, my mind was buzzing with possibilities. What would that man do now? Would he wait for Daniel to get in touch? Or would you take more drastic action? Laura sniffled beside him, staring out the window. Have you ever seen him act violently? He asked, breaking the silence. She hesitated. Yes. Once. He attacked a man who tried to stop us from arguing. He wasn't afraid to do it in the middle of the street. Daniel clenched the steering wheel tightly. That was the kind of man they were dealing with. Laura's phone vibrated again. This time, a message. Daniel glanced over. It was an address. He wants us to go to him, she whispered. A weight fell on Daniel's chest. That night's fate was already sealed. There was no way to escape. But this time, he wouldn't go as a victim. The darkness of the road seemed to stretch infinitely ahead, swallowing every meter the car covered. Daniel gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white, while Laura remained silent at his side. The address flashed on her cell phone screen, a grim invitation to the inevitable. Neither of them knew what awaited on the other side, but the absence of words between them made it clear that there was no going back. The air inside the car was heavy, filled with resentment, fear and a bitter residue of something that had once been love. Daniel breathed deeply, trying to contain the avalanche of emotions that threatened to overflow. The man they were heading towards wasn't just any criminal. This was someone who had devised a meticulous plan, using Laura as a chess piece to get to him. And now, Daniel was driving directly into the trap. Laura clasped her hands in her lap, her fingers shaking. Regret was written all over his face, but Daniel no longer knew if that mattered. The betrayal had already been digested, chewed and spat back out as something he could never forget. But what came now? What did this man really want? Money? Revenge? Or something worse? The car approached the indicated location. It was an empty parking lot on the outskirts of town, surrounded by abandoned warehouses. The lights flickered dimly, a few broken bulbs casting unsettling shadows across the cracked asphalt. Daniel stopped the car and turned off the engine, the silence that followed was deafening. Laura didn't move. His gaze fixed on nothingness, his eyes teary. And now? His voice was almost a whisper, weak, full of fear. Daniel didn't respond right away. He just opened the door and walked out, feeling the cold air cut into his skin. He looked around, searching for any sign of movement. Then, across the parking lot, a silhouette emerged from the shadows. He recognized it immediately. The man walked slowly, as if each step was calculated to keep tension in the air. His face was marked by time and the life he had led. He didn't look like someone who was afraid. He was wearing a long coat, and his hands were in his pockets, hiding something Daniel couldn't see. Laura finally got out of the car, her steps hesitant. I'm glad you came, the man's voice cut through the silence, carrying an amusing and threatening tone at the same time. I was starting to think I would have to pay a visit to your house. Daniel kept his gaze fixed on him, trying to read any movement, any sign of imminent danger. Let's get this over with, he said, his voice full of contempt. The man smiled, but his eyes remained cold. Oh, I like you, Daniel. I like your stance, the way you think you're still in control. But you're not. Daniel felt every fiber of his body tighten. You already got what you wanted. He manipulated Laura, he infiltrated my life. And now you're here, demanding what? Money? The man tilted his head, as if considering the question. Money is always useful, but in your case, it's not just about money. It's about understanding that no one has absolute power over their own life. You always thought you had everything under control, didn't you? A stable marriage, a successful career. But all of this was an illusion. And now, I'm the nightmare that came to wake you up. Daniel clenched his fists, anger bubbling inside him. I don't have time for your cheap philosophies. Just say what you want. The man laughed, taking his hands out of his pockets. No weapon, just a calculated move to test Daniel's nerves. I want you to assume your royal position. You lost, Daniel. He lost his wife to me, he lost control of his life. But I am generous. If you give me what I want, maybe I'll let you go without more serious consequences. Daniel felt Laura shrink next to him. He looked at her for a moment and realized that she already knew. I already knew that this man never had just one financial goal. He wanted to destroy everything. What if I say no? The man's smile disappeared. You don't want to do this. The silence between them was interrupted by the sound of a distant car, tires skidding on the asphalt. Daniel didn't blink. He couldn't afford to show fear. You want me to give you everything. But you forgot one detail, he finally said. The man raised his eyebrow. And what would it be? Daniel took a step forward. You could have planned all this, you could have manipulated Laura, you could have dragged me into this game. But at the end of the day, you don't know me. The man tilted his head, as if evaluating his words. And what does that mean? Daniel didn't hesitate. It means I'm not as predictable as you think. And before the man could react, Daniel took a recorder out of his pocket. Pressed play. The man's own voice began to echo in the parking lot, every threat, every confession spoken moments ago now registered. The smile on his face disappeared. For the first time, the eyes reflected something other than pure confidence. I recorded everything. All the shit you said. And now, I have enough evidence to put you back in prison. Laura held her breath. The man remained motionless. For a moment, everything was suspended, as if time had stopped. Then, he laughed. But it was an empty laugh, without the triumphant tone it had been before. Do you think this will stop me? Daniel didn't back down. No. But it will be enough for you to spend the rest of your life on the run. The man took a deep breath, his gaze sharp as a blade. You don't understand, Daniel. This isn't about me. Daniel felt a shiver run down his spine. So what is it about? The man smiled again, but this time, there was something different. Do you think you're the only one I have in my hands? Daniel's stomach dropped. You didn't destroy me alone. He looked at Laura. She helped too. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. The man put his hands in his pockets again, took a step back. What are you going to do with this information, Daniel? And then, without another word, he turned and disappeared into the shadows. The wind blew cold. The recorder was still in Daniel's hand, but now, it seemed insignificant. Laura looked at him, her face falling. What do we do now? Daniel didn't respond. Because, for the first time, he didn't know the answer. The silence between them dragged on like a ghost, filling every space between the unspoken words. Daniel held the recorder tightly, feeling the weight of that revelation throbbing inside him. The man's words still echoed in his mind, the insinuation that Laura was part of it all. He wanted to believe it was just manipulation, a dirty move to plant doubt and destabilize him even further. But he knew that the truth was often disguised as poison. Laura took a hesitant step towards him, her expression shattered. Daniel, it's not what you think. He raised his hand, stopping her from continuing. Then tell me what I should think. She took a deep breath, her eyes watering. I wasn't involved. I never wanted it to get to this point. But it arrived, he cut in, his voice tense, holding back all the fury that threatened to overflow. She looked at the floor, tears falling silently. I knew he was dangerous. I knew he was using me. But I couldn't get out sooner. Daniel felt his chest tighten. You could have told me. I tried. He let out a dry laugh, full of disbelief. When? After sleeping with him? After letting him into our lives? After everything was completely destroyed? Laura closed her eyes, clenching her fists. I made a mistake. I know I made a mistake. Daniel shook his head, taking a step back. You didn't make a mistake, Laura. You made choices. Her silence was his only response. He looked around, the empty parking lot, the sharp wind carrying with it the feeling that it was all just a nightmare. But it was real. The betrayal, the manipulation, the fact that he had been a pawn in a game he didn't even know he was playing. And now, the final piece was in his hands. The recorder. The only concrete proof that all this wasn't just paranoia, that this man was a criminal, that he had been threatened, that his life had been used as a bargaining chip. He pressed the button and listened to the recording again. The threats, the man's arrogant tone, the confessions that now sounded even more unbearable. Laura turned her face away, unable to hear. What are you going to do? She asked, her voice broken. Daniel took a deep breath, closing his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, his decision was made. I'm going to end this. Her eyes widened. How? He looked straight at her, and this time, there was no more hesitation. You don't need to know. Laura felt a shiver run down her spine. Daniel, please. He didn't wait for her to finish. He walked to the car, opened the door and got in, leaving her there, standing in the dim lights of the parking lot. As he drove, his mind was in a whirlwind. Whatever he was going to do, it needed to be quick. The man wouldn't wait. He must have known by now that Daniel wasn't the type to just give everything away. He picked up the phone, dialed a number and waited. I need you to find me. Now. The voice on the other end hesitated. Daniel, it's almost 3 a.m. What is happening? He looked in the rearview mirror, making sure he wasn't being followed. Just find me. I explain everything personally. The address has been agreed. He hung up. The car drove through the empty streets, and for the first time in a long time, Daniel felt like he was in control. When he arrived at the agreed location, he saw the man waiting for him. An old friend, someone who owed a favor or two, someone who knew the ins and outs of the law better than any office lawyer. Is this serious? The man asked, crossing his arms. Daniel threw the recorder on the table between them. Listen and tell me yourself. The man took the device and pressed play. As the words came out, his expression hardened. This is heavy. Do you have any idea what you're messing with? Daniel kept his gaze fixed. I have to end this. The other side, passing his hand over his face. If you go to the police, you will need protection. This guy isn't just going to disappear. I know. And Laura? Daniel looked away. I don't know. His friend watched him for a moment before letting out a long sigh. I'll take care of it. But you need to disappear for a while. Daniel nodded. I had already thought about that. He stood up, looked one last time at the recorder and the man in front of him. Let me know when this is over. He left without looking back. When he returned home, Laura was sitting in the living room, the lights off, her eyes red from crying. He stopped at the entrance, watching her silently. Will you still hate me after this is all over? She asked, her voice low, almost a whisper. Daniel watched her for a long moment before responding. I don't know if what I feel now has a name. She closed her eyes, as if that hurt more than any insult. He took another step, but not towards her. Tomorrow morning, I'll leave. Laura looked up, panic written all over her face. What? That's over, Laura. We're done. She stood up quickly, her eyes teary. Daniel, please. He raised his hand, the same way he had done before, stopping her from continuing. There is nothing more to be said. Laura collapsed onto the sofa, her body weak, as if all the strength had been drained from her. Daniel went up the stairs, entered the room and started packing his things. He didn't look back. The next day, at dawn, he left without saying a word. The city looked the same, but to him, nothing was the same. His phone vibrated in his pocket. A message. It's done. Daniel took a deep breath and moved on. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was finally free. The road stretched ahead, a trail of asphalt that seemed to have no end. Daniel drove aimlessly, thoughts piercing his mind like sharp knives. Everything he had built was behind him, reduced to ruins. Marriage, trust, stability. The pain was no longer like an uncontrollable fire, now, it was a deep, biting cold that consumed him from the inside. He knew he couldn't go back, and maybe he didn't want to. What was left there was no longer for him. The phone vibrated in the passenger seat. He glanced over. An unknown number. He thought about ignoring it, but something inside him made him answer. You disappeared quickly, the voice on the other end was familiar. He didn't respond. No need to worry. Your problem has been resolved. Daniel remained silent, feeling the weight of those words. What happened to him? The voice on the other end let out a tired sigh. Let's just say he won't be a problem anymore. Daniel didn't ask for details. I didn't need to know. The silence stretched for a few seconds before the voice returned. And you? What are you going to do now? He looked at the endless road in front of him. I'm still deciding. He hung up the phone and threw it on the bench. The world was open, and for the first time in years, he wasn't tied down by anything. Laura was sitting on the sofa, looking lost at the wall, her eyes empty. The emptiness inside her was unbearable, a black hole that sucked in everything around it. She tried to sleep, but the silence in the house now felt like a cruel reminder of what she had lost. She took out her cell phone and opened the photo gallery. He slid his fingers across the screen, passing through moments frozen in time. The wedding, the trips, the smiles. Everything seemed to belong to someone else, another version of herself that no longer existed. A noise outside made her startle. He ran to the window, peering through the curtains. A black car was parked across the street. He felt a shiver run up his spine. They had promised that everything was resolved. But was it really? He closed the curtains and hugged himself, trying to convince himself that this was just paranoia. But deep down, I knew that the past didn't disappear so easily. Time passed, but the wounds did not heal. Daniel rebuilt his life somewhere else, away from everything that reminded him of what happened. He got a new job, started going to new places. The weight of betrayal was still there, but he learned to carry it without letting you crush him. It was in a cafe, one morning, that he met someone new. Her smile was unlike anything I had ever seen before. Natural, light, unpretentious. She asked if he wanted company at the table, and he hesitated before saying yes. For the first time, he felt that something inside him was healing. Laura wasn't as lucky. Betrayal, mistakes, and consequences weighed on her like invisible chains. Time passed, but the feeling that everything could fall apart at any moment never went away. She tried to move on, tried to rebuild her life, but the shadows of the past always reached her. Repentance was a prison without bars, and she was its only prisoner. One night, his phone rang. The number was unknown. He answered with shaking hands. Don't think this is over. The voice on the other end was cold, empty, full of silent warning. She hung up the phone with her heart racing. I knew that one day, everything would come back to take its toll. And so, everyone went their own way. Daniel found a new chance to start over, but he would carry the scars forever. Laura would live with the shadow of what she did, knowing that the past never completely disappears. Fate has cruel ways of collecting the debts we leave behind. Now tell me, what did you think of this story? Leave your opinion in the comments, we want to know your view on this outcome. If you haven't subscribed yet, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next stories. Here, we never support betrayal. Consequences always arrive, one way or another. See you next time.